There are moments in life when silence is louder than thunder, when the absence of words strikes deeper than 1,000 speeches. You have felt it before. That instant when someone walks into a room, says nothing, yet every heart shifts, every eye turns, and every will bends. That is not coincidence. That is power. The world does not belong to those who speak the loudest, but to those who can command presence without uttering a single syllable. To win any situation without saying a word is not magic, it is mastery. It is the art of controlling what cannot be argued with. The gaze, the posture, the silence that unsettles the proud and strengthens the determined. Remember this, people fear what they cannot predict, and they respect what they cannot easily grasp. When you refuse to explain yourself, when you stand unshaken, you force others to question themselves. You make them wonder, what does he know? What does she hold inside? That mystery is your sword, and that silence is your shield. If you can learn to command without noise, to influence without speech, then victory will walk towards you, uninvited but undeniable. Presence is not about speaking, it is about being. A person with true presence does not need to introduce themselves, nor do they require permission to be noticed. They carry themselves in such a way that every gesture, every breath, and every silence demands recognition. To understand presence, you must understand that the human mind is not guided only by words. It is swayed by impressions, by instincts, by the weight of energy that one projects. You can enter a room full of voices, and yet silence it without lifting a finger, because your very being announces something unspoken. That power comes not from arrogance, but from deliberate control over how you hold yourself, how you walk, how you look into the eyes of others without hesitation. Presence is a weapon sharper than a blade, for it disarms those who are unsure of themselves, and it elevates you without you needing to shout for respect. Presence is built through discipline, because nothing about it is accidental. To radiate authority without speaking, you must train the body and the mind until they move as one. Your posture cannot collapse, your gaze cannot scatter, your movements cannot betray nervousness. Every detail, even the silence between your steps, communicates something. People will study you not because you ask them to, but because their instincts compel them. Presence is the unseen hand that guides perception. It tells others you are someone to be measured against, even before they hear your voice. To develop this force, you must first master yourself, because presence begins with inner certainty. If you doubt yourself, others will sense it. If you are unshakable within, no external chaos can disturb the aura you project. The greatest figures of history knew this secret. They understood that power does not only flow from armies, riches, or speeches, it flows from the command of presence. A leader who can stand still and say nothing, yet make others restless, has a weapon that cannot be taken away. Presence unsettles enemies and inspires followers because it awakens emotions people cannot explain. They may not know why they look at you differently, but they do. They may not understand why your silence weighs more than another's words, but it does. Presence is not loud, but it is unforgettable. It lingers in memory long after you leave the room, making people replay every moment, every glance, every motion, trying to decode the mystery of why they felt smaller or stronger in your shadow. What most people fail to see is that presence is not just external, it is psychological warfare. When you refuse to explain yourself, when you hold silence where others would rush to fill the void, you take control of the battlefield of the mind. Those around you will reveal themselves in their discomfort. They will speak too much, move too fast, explain too eagerly, and in doing so they expose their weaknesses. Presence is about restraint, and restraint is power. The one who holds back commands more than the one who spills endlessly. This is why presence cannot be faked for long. Pretenders reveal their insecurity in their gestures. True masters reveal nothing they do not want others to see. To carry presence, you must cultivate patience, for silence without strength is emptiness, but silence with strength is domination. You will come to realize that presence is not about being liked, but about being recognized as undeniable. Some will envy it, others will admire it, but none will ignore it. That is the essence of influence without words. You bypass debate and move directly into control. People bend to presence because it operates on instincts older than language itself. It stirs fear, respect, and curiosity all at once. To win without speaking, you must first build an aura that others cannot dismiss, an aura that speaks on your behalf, even in silence. This is why presence is the first step in learning how to win any situation without words. It is the art of being untouchable, the art of being unshakable, the art of standing as a mountain in a world of dust. Presence is not given, it is forged, and once you hold it, the world will bend before it, even if your lips never part. Silence is often mistaken for weakness, yet in truth it is the sharpest form of strategy. Words can be challenged, argued, dismissed, but silence cannot be fought. When you choose silence, you force others to wrestle not with you, but with themselves. They begin to fill the void with their own insecurities, their own doubts, their own fears. In silence, you create a battlefield that belongs entirely to you, because it is invisible and psychological. Strategy begins not with what you reveal, but with what you conceal, and silence is the perfect veil. It keeps your intentions hidden, your power unmeasured, and your enemies restless. People fear the unknown, and when you do not explain yourself, you become the unknown they cannot defeat. This is why silence has toppled kings and unsettled rulers, because no weapon strikes harder than the imagination of a worried mind. The art of silence as strategy is not about avoiding speech forever. It is about choosing moments where silence cuts deeper than words. A well-timed pause, an unanswered insult, a refusal to explain. These moments echo louder than the longest speeches. Silence is the art of controlling the rhythm of interaction, forcing others to dance to your tempo without realizing it. When they expect you to react but you remain calm, you disarm them. When they provoke you but you stand unmoved, you overpower them. This is strategy at its finest, using restraint to let the opponent reveal their weaknesses while you stand untouched. A single silence, placed with precision, can achieve more than hours of speaking, because silence cannot be misquoted, twisted, or used against you. It remains untouchable, and therefore undefeatable. Those who master silence learn how to turn it into a weapon of influence. Imagine two people in negotiation. One speaks endlessly, revealing his desires, his fears, his desperation. The other listens silently, offering nothing. Who holds the power? The one who speaks digs his own grave, while the silent one learns, calculates, and controls. Silence forces others to reveal more than they should, and in that revelation lies your advantage. Silence is not absence, it is presence magnified. It makes people feel the weight of your attention without the distraction of words. They start to wonder what you are thinking, why you are quiet, and what hidden power you hold. In their guessing, they surrender control to you because silence creates pressure, and pressure bends the unprepared. This is the silent storm that wins wars without lifting a sword. Silence also builds mystique, and mystique is power. People fear what they cannot define and respect what they cannot understand. When you speak too much, you reduce yourself to clarity, to predictability, to something easily measured. But when you remain silent, you become a puzzle, and puzzles attract fascination and caution alike. Silence gives you the appearance of depth, even when you are simply observing. Shields you from the judgment of careless words and grants you the advantage of time, because in silence you can think, calculate, and decide without being rushed. A strategist knows that silence buys more than peace, it buys control. While others burn their energy trying to explain, justify, or defend, you conserve yours and strike only when it matters. This is why silence is not weakness, but the ultimate proof of strength. To master the art of silence as strategy, you must resist the urge to fill every moment with words. Most people speak because silence feels uncomfortable, but that discomfort is your ally. The longer you can hold it, the more power you command over those who cannot. The ability to remain silent when insulted, when pressured, when provoked, is the ability to stand above the emotions that enslave others. Silence becomes not just a tactic, but a declaration of superiority. The greatest victories often come not from the words you deliver, but from the words you withhold. In every situation, silence is a choice, and the one who chooses it wisely bends the outcome in his favor. For silence is not the absence of action, it is the highest form of action, invisible yet undeniable, patient yet decisive, silent yet absolute. Control without words is the highest level of influence because it requires no explanation and no justification. When you command with words, you invite resistance. But when you command through action, posture, and presence, you bypass argument altogether. True mastery lies in shaping the environment without announcing it, in guiding people's choices while letting them believe they are acting freely. This is control without confrontation, the invisible hand that bends the world in your favor. It is not about being aggressive, but about being undeniable. Your silence, your composure, your ability to remain unshaken becomes a mirror in which others see their own weakness. They follow not because you ordered them to, but because they cannot resist the gravity of your authority. This form of control is rare, but once mastered it makes you untouchable, because nothing can be held against you when you have said nothing, promised nothing, and revealed nothing. To master control without words, you must learn to see what others cannot. People reveal themselves constantly in their gestures, expressions, and tone. And if you train your eyes to notice, you will always know more than they intend to show. The one who observes silently is always a step ahead of the one who speaks too quickly. When you hold your silence, you collect information while others scatter theirs into the air. And knowledge is the foundation of control. Without speaking, you can make someone nervous with a look, confident with a nod, or uncertain with a pause. These subtle signals are the language of control that few understand but everyone feels. Mastery lies in using them with precision, never revealing more than you choose, and letting others expose themselves without realizing it. Control without words also comes from the discipline of emotional restraint. The world is full of people who cannot govern themselves, who erupt in anger, drown in fear, or collapse under doubt. They are slaves to their emotions, and because they cannot control themselves, they cannot control others. But when you remain calm in storms, unbothered under pressure, and composed when provoked, you display a power that speaks louder than any declaration. People look to stability, to anchors, to those who do not waver when all else is chaos. By being that figure, you become the silent ruler of any situation. You do not need to raise your voice to control the room. Your very calmness commands it. To others, it feels like gravity, pulling them toward your steadiness because they cannot resist what they lack within themselves. This is mastery through control of self, which always translates into control of others. Through self, which always translates into control of others. Another form of control without words is the strategic use of presence to shape decisions. Imagine walking into a negotiation and saying nothing, simply listening, observing, letting silence grow heavy until the other side fills it with concessions. Imagine dealing with an enemy who tries to provoke you, only to be destroyed by your refusal to react. Imagine leading people not by long speeches, but by embodying the strength, discipline, and certainty they long for. This is how control without words is exercised. Through influence that bypasses logic and strikes directly at the instinctual level of human nature. Words appeal to reason, but silence and presence appeal to fear, respect, and desire, which are far more powerful motivators. by shaping how people feel rather than what they think. You hold them in your hands without ever needing to declare it. Ultimately, control without words is about becoming the one others cannot ignore, cannot read, and cannot resist. It is about being the calm force in a chaotic world, the quiet storm that dominates without destruction. It requires mastery of self, observation of others, and discipline in silence. Once you learn this, you will find that the world bends more easily to those who do not explain themselves than to those who constantly argue their case. People surrender to what they cannot fully understand, and they obey what they cannot defeat. Mastering control without words makes you both mysterious and undefeatable. When your presence speaks louder than your tongue, you will no longer need to chase power, because power itself will come to you, unspoken yet absolute. Power is not always spoken. Influence is not always shouted. Victory is not always claimed with noise. The true art of winning lies in presence that commands, silence that unsettles, and control that needs no words. You have seen how presence turns heads without permission, how silence disarms the strongest voices, and how mastery without speech bends the will of others. These are not tricks but disciplines, forged through patience, self-mastery, and unshakable certainty. When you walk with presence, you need no introduction. When you wield silence, you hold the advantage no weapon can pierce. When you master control without words, the world itself becomes pliable in your hands. In every battle of life, remember that those who rush to speak reveal their weakness, while those who restrain themselves preserve their power. To stand unbroken in silence is to remind the world that your strength is not in noise but in depth, not in explanation but in command. You become the unseen force that others cannot measure, the quiet fire that others cannot extinguish. This is how one wins without speaking, how one bends reality without pleading, and how one leaves a mark that echoes long after the moment has passed. Carry this wisdom not as theory but as practice. Let your presence speak when words fail. Let your silence be your shield when provoked. And let your unseen control guide you to victories no one can deny. For the strongest voice in the world is often the one that is never heard, yet never forgotten. Thank you for your time. May strength guide your silence, and may you walk with the kind of presence that wins every room without saying a single word. God bless you.